trump over Imagine Austin plan. And when we don't have them, then it has to have a very serious conversation, debate, and discussion before those things are implemented. And one of the things I mentioned in the survey or in the questionnaire is if we don't have transit solutions, tactical and strategic solutions for the plans that are occurring and kind of being impacted with high density structures or community projects, we have to have that because we're in the boat we are now with issues because we don't have those plans in place.
Mike?
Thanks, Peggy, for the question. First thing I'm trying to find out is how staff determines and defines consistent with. That to me is a critical point. Two, even if it's consistent with, and we all agree on their definition, the neighborhood plan is the neighborhood plan. The comp plan is simply a visionary guiding principle document, and as I responded in the questionnaire, the neighborhood plans absolutely are the foundation for anything that is to happen. In areas where there's not a neighborhood plan, if those areas have a neighborhood contact team established, I believe that should be the overriding authority for any future growth and or zoning changes that are contemplated. You don't have to have a neighborhood plan to protect your community, but it's absolutely important. And we know that we can't get everyone that wants a neighborhood plan done quickly, and especially not before the comp plan. So I think we have to look at other tools as well, in addition to our existing neighborhood plans and contact teams, to give those communities who have interests in the area that they live the authority to be the voice for their growth and development within their own neighborhoods. So I absolutely support the plans over the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to Roy and our environmental question.
I get one?
You get one, two if you're quick.
Okay, well, then I get one. We're right here in East Austin. It's been an ongoing concern for many of our members, the pure casting site. Now, that's been a question on our questionnaire in the past. The steps that were taken took us to the EPA and T6 here in Texas and the city and Coder and we've been on some conference calls. Register we're alive today to get learning some dance moves from these folks because no one's dealing with it. Well, it's still putting out 7 known carcinogens every day right across from an elementary school. And they just don't rise to the level of this will kill you. They come back short on all cases. So we're not making progress there. So would you, as a city council member, agree to sponsor a city ordinance, since Austin is one of the only major cities in Texas that does not have an air quality nuisance ordinance? Would you work to implement that and do that within 6 months of taking the oath of office? And you went first, Mike.
Sure, absolutely. I fully support it. And Peer Casting Project is something that I've worked with Susanna and the neighbors. Paige is one of those that we've met with repeatedly. Totally believe that Peer Casting needs to be moved out of the area that it exists in, but it's been there for decades. I have met with Andy Edgerton, the owner of Peer Casting, on many occasions. He's open to moving. In fact, he has the property. The problem with Mr. Edgerton is he has a granted foundry, and it's based on, his entitlements are based on very, very old standards. In order for him to reapply to TCEQ and to create a foundry in a new location, he's going to have to get all new equipment. He's going to have to comply with today's regulations. It's going to cost him millions of dollars. So for him, the position is, I'll move, but who's going to pay for my setup operations at the new facility where it's going to cost me tens of millions of dollars? I think that's worthy of our consideration. I think that's worthy of a citizen vote. If Peer Casting, and I believe it is, if Peer Casting is truly that much of a detriment to that community, to the elementary school, and to the neighbors, we need to do everything within our power to work with Peer Casting and move them out of the neighborhood. I think they're willing to do that, but I do think there's significant hurdles, and it will be costly. But at the same time, we've done things that I think are not strictly based on monetary constraints. We've done it because we believe it's the right thing to do. Right here, less than a quarter of a mile away, we protected the Oak Springs. Very historic in terms of the East Austin community where they drew water from. And it was purchased by private property owners to put a dollar store. Well, I led the effort along with Mayor Pro Tem Cole to put an item on to spend $1.5 million to purchase this small tract of land so that it will never be developed over. Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to do in instances like pier casting. It's going to cost us money, but sometimes it's not just about the money, it's about what needs to be done for the community, and I'll continue to support moving pier casting up to and including putting a bond item on that will allow us to purchase that site.
So Roy, with regard to your question, would I support ordinance? Absolutely. Pure casting is just one example in our city. Pure casting specifically, there are heavy metals that it's emitting, chromium, nickel, and copper, right next to Zavala Elementary. I have done a lot of volunteer work with Zavala Elementary. As a graduate student, I would come and do science presentations and pour liquid nitrogen on the floor and for all the students, and it was just phenomenal. The school's amazing, and I would absolutely support an ordinance. And this is not the only offender in East Austin or in our city. You have a grease recycling facility over off of Shady Lane in 7th Street, and children in that, there's Allen Elementary right next door, okay? That's another one. So you can't just, I don't think it's our responsibility as a city government to pay for all of these solutions, but to set the bar and say, you know what, to operate in our city, you have to meet these criteria. And children over there in Allen Elementary during the summer and in the days when they're unloading the grease, there's asthma issues. So it's not just one, there's several. So I do support that. I think we have to be very careful and tactical in how we define what the limits are, but it needs to be done. Absolutely.
Win.
Okay. Now, I'm not a business person, but I've been talking to quite a few lately, and so I'm expressing some of their concerns, and thank you for your detailed answers. If you're going to make it as a small business person, you have to move fast to capture your opportunities. And business owners in Austin have a name for the city of Austin. They call it the Department of Business Prevention. They say it isn't necessarily what the city wants is bad, but the delivery system is inefficient, and there is a lot of friction and grit in the system where the departments and the bureaucracy are at odds with each other. They're inefficient, they're slow, they're unresponsive, and they're contradictory. None of these people want safeguards removed. They want to know how you will remove impediments and friction in the system that has built over the years and streamline the process for business people so that they can capture their opportunities. I have several examples that I won't read of business people that have run into some serious things. Well, one of them, John Bromfield of Gardenville, was told by a city staff person that it was just time for him to move out of town. John thought that was inappropriate. I think it is too. I mean, that's the kind of thing some of these people are running into. Greg Bonanno of New World Deli was given a failing grade for his only failing grade for health inspection because the inspector had someone with him that he was training. Greg had to pay $100 or more for a second inspection, which he passed with flying colors, making no changes. He knew the guy was grandstanding. These are the kinds of things that are frustrating people. They don't need extra things on the front end. They need things now to make things work better. Sorry, that was very long. That's their concern. That's what I'm hearing from people.
What's the question?
Yeah, what's the question?
The question. I did insert it there. Let me read
The question was, would you remove the impediments to allowing business?
Yeah. Because these are things that have built up over the years, just kind of an accretion. How will you streamline and remove them, if that's possible?
So as a small business owner, I really feel for the complaints that are, and I've heard several, especially with one Texas Center, people trying to get permits, even South by Southwest issues that occurred that people could not get their permits to do what they needed to do. I think that it's a leadership issue. It's kind of a expectation of what's important in our city. I think we do not the city council doesn't get across enough that local businesses are the lifeblood of this community. And we have to do whatever we can to support them, remove roadblocks. And as a city council member in place two, I will set that expectation and just be saying that over and over, because it's a leadership issue. There are individual problems and roadblocks, but you have to, the people, the boots on the ground that deal with the small business owners have to understand what the priority is and be held accountable for that. And they have to understand this, they have to support small businesses and help them. And I don't think that expectation is there.
Right.
Well, Lynn, being council member for 6 years, I've dealt with so many of these issues that have come up, and I agree that there are times when it's difficult. But here's what leadership really is. Leadership is really being able to tell folks no, because in some cases you have to tell them no. And the example that was brought up was South by Southwest. If you had any idea how many calls we get the weeks leading up to South by Southwest saying, the city won't give me a permit for my venue. If you knew the tricks of the trade where folks apply for music permits so they get a downtown block, well, we only issue temporary permits for one-day events. Well, they address it on each corner of the block so that they can have 4 days in a row of a massive blowout. Those are the kinds of things that you have to be able to stand strong and say, you're circumventing the process, you're circumventing the code, and I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to do that. You also have to tell them no and work with them on traffic mitigation and the impacts that it has on the neighborhoods. Those things are critically important. The food trailer industry. As chair of Health and Human Service, that thing exploded so quick. We had folks coming to us saying, you can't have them more than a few hundred feet apart, more than a few hundred feet from a residence. Those were important issues. I supported the creativity of micro business industry here in Austin. I still do. But you don't just let them do it whenever and wherever they want. There has to be regulations. Same with live music. I'm arguably the biggest live music supporter and small business venues for live music in town. But I've also fought back and pushed back and said just because we're the live music capital of the world does not mean you can plug in and play as loud as you want, whenever you want, wherever you want. We have to do it with reason. I think there's a healthy balance. Sometimes staff does go a little too far and shut folks down. But that's where the council comes in, and that's where you have to really drill down into that issue and find out if it was done with sound justification and reason and within the law or not. And if there are personality conflicts, that's where leadership comes in and you work through those. We did that just this last week at the Mohawk. The Mohawk spent $150,000 improving their facilities. Fire officials went in, shut them down, said you're not going to be able to open for South by Southwest. It really wasn't a code issue. It was just a judgment call by the fire department. So we got everybody in a room within 2 hours and sat them down and walked through each issue line by line. And we were able to address all of them. They opened up. They're having a successful South by Southwest. But I respected and understood where the firefighter was coming from and the concerns he laid out. Once we were able to sit down, line out specific plan of action, they approved it and we moved forward. I'll continue to do that as a council member. I'll continue to say no when it's necessary to say no, but reach out and put in that extra effort when we need to really drill down into what is the concern and what is the issue.
Okay, Debbie?
One very quick question and then the meaty question, if that's all right. I know Laura's heard this, and Mike, you've heard me ad nauseum talk about the preservation of life standard. Do you support implementing that in the police department? And would you encourage by some sort of city council proclamation that happen?
Sure. It's the devil's in the details. Obviously, I support the preservation of life. Now, what the standard looks like at the end of the day when it makes it through a public input process and comes to council, I think you have to wait and reserve your commitment necessarily to what it looks like on that day. Any council member can make an amendment to it and change it when it hits the dais. I absolutely support having higher standards for our police department, ensuring that we do everything we can, that deadly force is an absolute last alternative. So I look forward to talking with you more about it, but I can't absolutely commit to anything that isn't on the dais in front of us right now.
Just a clarification before you answer, that it's a very specific legal standard and it really only has a narrow frame of language. It can't really be jacked with, in other words. So.
Okay.
So I completely supported David. We talked about this, and I've actually sent letters to the media supporting this. And what's bothersome to me is the silence of the city council with regard to the violence that's going on in East Austin and the deadly force that's being inflicted on our minority men in East Austin. The silence is deafening to me by the city council. And there are a lot of social inequity issues here in Austin. And to me, this one is the most important because it has to do with life and death and absolute safety of our neighborhoods. Even the Austin Neighborhoods Council has come out and said there's issues with the police department, with the brutality that's going on. Now, not all police officers are, are perpetrating such effects, but there's a small portion, and they have to be dealt with. So I absolutely support it.
Thanks. I'm going to roll into something else. We're talking about leadership here and social equity, African American and Hispanic quality of life initiatives. We're supposed to address several issues to include neighborhood sustainability, police accountability, health and human services, economic development, arts and entertainment, and education. The African American quality of life over its 6-year span has spent $750,000. We were supposed to invest a lot of money in the East Side, in other words. With respect to improving the lives of citizens of this community, what are your top priorities, and how do you come to these priorities, and how we improve any or all of these concerns with respect to some of these issues you brought up, with respect to the African American youth are continuing to more and more be shuffled from school to prison, and more, African Americans 3 times as unemployed as whites. More and more businesses are closing. More and more houses are being foreclosed upon. So, Laura, start.
Okay. So that's pretty extensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go with it where you will.
So with regard to, first step in my mind is education. And I think you can work yourself out of poverty into, we've heard the working poor. Okay, you can work yourself out of poverty, but you cannot work yourself out of poverty to middle class. So I think education is the absolute key, and we have to focus on education. And it doesn't mean you have to go to college, it means training programs, etc. To me, that is the baseline strategic emphasis that we have to spend on our youth. Also, there's a lot of money the City of Austin has at its discretion to support rec centers, to support programs for youth, and to keep them busy in healthy activities over the summer and during the school year, and I think we do not do enough for that. And that is something the city can do directly to support youth and get them kind of out of the options that are taking them down a non-healthy path versus getting them into a more healthy kind of stream. With regard to housing is a big issue. Affordable housing is a big issue in Austin. One thing we've proposed, and this has been asked for several years of council people who are running for the city council and council members currently, to do a homestead exemption for the city of Austin. And I absolutely commit to that, a $35,000 homestead exemption. It will cost some money. There'll be some revenue that we do not get as a city, but it will. There are ways we can find that. We can do cost reductions in our large departments that are, what I would say, not focused on cost reductions and efficiency. So we can find that money, and that would really impact homeowners, and I would say in East Austin, areas that are being impacted by the gentrification. It will help them. If you have a $100,000 home, $35,000 homestead exemption, city homestead exemption will help you tremendously. If you've got a $400,000 home in West Austin, it's not going to affect you, and that's not the goal. The goal is to affect and increase home ownership in low-income areas. So those are some of the tactical and strategic things that I would look at.
Thanks, Debbie. I'll try to hit on all the points. I totally agree that homestead exemption is something that should be considered. But when your overall tax bill from the city of Austin is only 17% of the 100% bill, even a homestead exemption is really not going to have that much of an impact. It will for some. I'm the only council member in 6 years that actually proposed a homestead exemption. I think there are other tools that are infinitely more important and could prove to be more useful in reducing tax burdens. And that's what I've worked on since prior to getting into office. with State Representative Rodriguez, and that's the Homestead Preservation District. It literally will cap your taxes moving forward today and never raise again. But your neighbor who moves in next door or builds a house next door pays 100% market value for their taxes, subsidizing the neighboring taxes. That's the way to stem gentrification. That's the way to not force folks to have to sell their homes in Old East Austin that are now high valued and they're being priced out because of rising property taxes. I'll continue to work on that. We have an issue at the county, not at the city. The county has to be a partner per the legislation. We can't seem to get support from our county officials. I'll continue to work with Commissioner Davis and Gomez to try to get their support. But that one tool, I think, could really have a tremendous impact on stemming the tide of gentrification and these folks having to flip their homes just to survive. As it relates to specific youth in East Austin, I've talked about this since being a firefighter. I believe we need to stop wasting all of our city tax dollars on recruiting firefighters, police officers, librarians, technicians, city planners. We need to stop recruiting all over the country in these other cities where they think they're great and bringing them here. We need to create programs within our school system. I have advocated for a public safety magnet school at Johnston High for almost 20 years now. But the politics of ASD are not easy, and you all know that. I continue to advocate for that. We were able to start the LBJ Fire Academy at LBJ High School. It's been a very successful program. It hasn't been a success in terms of those young high schoolers getting into the Austin Fire Department, but that's because I don't believe we've done enough. I'm committed to and have gone to the Firefighters Association and asked them, allow us via our contract to get those graduates of that program preferential scoring in the hiring process to make them Austin firefighters. Our base of recruiting should be here. It should be the folks that grew up in this town that understand this community, and I think will exponentially influence and enhance the service that we provide. I think one of the reasons I was very effective as a firefighter is because I lived here. I lived in the community that I served. And I was able to see it from a very different perspective from a firefighter that lives out in Dripping Springs and drives home every day and never even spends time in Austin. I also support making our public safety personnel live in the city of Austin. I will support that in negotiating their next contract, and I'm optimistic that we can get that done. I also, what's that?
I missed that, Mike.
I will support getting a provision in the next public safety negotiations or contracts that all public safety personnel live within the city of Austin moving forward.
Thank you.
Right. Not retrospectively. We can't do it retrospectively, but we can do it for those applying today. And we'll try to eliminate any loopholes like everybody getting a P.O. box in downtown. But those are some of the things. Southwest Key is another program. You will see an agenda item next week. For the first time ever, finally got it here. But it's the politics of schools and ASD and Southwest Key and East Austin. We finally are going to have a resolution for this council to consider a $250,000 agreement with Southwest Key Programs. Don't know if we'll make it there, but at least Councilmember Morrison and I got it on the agenda. And
What's the program?
it is the expansion of their facility. It's not supporting programming. It's supporting the construction facility of their new classroom.
If I can follow up, offer there might be a little school district to the east that might be willing to work with you if AISD.
Okay, the last area of question happens to do with government. You know, one of the issues that we face as our city grows is that we're probably the highest indebted city in the state of Texas per capita. And we've been fortunate to avoid some of the cities in other parts of the country whose indebtedness has led them to bankruptcy because our economy's been strong, but that's not a given. One of the things that happens is that our bonded indebtedness continues to grow. And we seem to believe that because we passed a bond 4 years ago, that level of indebtedness is okay with everybody, and so we start thinking about the next round on top of it. In other words, we never reset the clock back down to zero. And that shows up in the way we deal with bonds. And two questions. Would you agree that the bonds that we pass, we need to talk about the level of indebtedness before we go forward with the next bond election? And two, we seem to bond packages and bundles where we have items that may not be able to stand on their own. Then they get elected because with other things. Will you agree to unbundle those so that the public has a chance to vote on them independently? And it's a good example, the boardwalk. The voters vote to approve it, it goes over budget, where's the money going to come from? And yet we hear that we're committed to build it no matter what it costs. So, Mike?
Yeah, great points. And so here's one of the points that I talked about in terms of mistakes that I believe I've made and things that I've learned from. And that's exactly what you just mentioned. I believe that we should, to every extent possible, have each item stand on its own or die on its own. What I saw is in the 2006 bond package and what we're dealing with now is multiple projects across the city that we promised our citizens we would build and that we would complete, and none of them have enough funding. The biggest mistake we made was trying to create this pretty Christmas tree with all the gifts and bells and whistles on it, but none of those projects could be funded. You're going to see a municipal court on this next bond package, one we've already voted on. The Animal Center was $4 million short. The boardwalk ended up short. The Downtown Central Library was $30 million short. Again, we put all of this stuff together. We told the citizens this is what we're doing, and now we can't do it. And so now, in the next subsequent bond package, you're going to see things that you already voted on the first time around. I believe that was a mistake, and I've directed staff publicly in their briefings to not do that. If it cost $150 million, tell us that. Don't tell us you think you can do it for 110 and we'll figure it out. We have to be honest with our citizens. I think it's going to be difficult for us to go back and ask for $600 million when we didn't live up to our commitments from 2006. Just to be flat out honest with you. And if you read the article in the Statesman this week, it's exactly what I said to Patrick George. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to get support for the litany of items that our city staff is saying are needed. We're going to have to cut it down. We're going to have a bare bones, in my opinion, basic needs item. I really want us to get off of funding ongoing O&M in facilities with every 6 years of bond package. I think it's just unsustainable. You can't keep doing that. And so I will commit to decoupling as much as I can, Jeff and everyone, so that you all can decide, the citizens can tell us what really is your highest priority. The biggest political battle, I think, Jeff, one of the biggest is going to be Waller Creek. If you've seen the request for Waller Creek, it's hundreds of millions of dollars when you couple it all together. And that's going to be tough. I support building out Waller Creek, but I'm not sure I support it over some of the other needs that we have at this current time. That's going to be a strong debate, but I'm willing to separate those items out and let the citizens decide.
It's a great question. The debt that we have from the bonds affects our affordability in kind of in a hidden way that I don't think citizens really understand. I think there needs to be education of our voters that the bonds equal debt to the city, and to understand the percentage that our general fund goes to servicing that debt is absolutely huge. And it means that we cannot fund programs that we want to fund because we're servicing that debt. So I think education is important of the voters, and decoupling these programs so that it's not a bundle, and decoupling so that voters can decide what the priorities are. I think that when a city, and I'm with you, Jeff, on this, when a city has so much debt, it really risks our affordability, but it also risks how we can sustain ourselves. And so it's very concerning to me. So I think maybe that's a short answer, but I think we have to decouple and let the voters understand what exactly they're voting on, and how it affects our affordability of our city.
Okay.
It's huge.
We have just about got to our time limit. We have enough for a little wrap-up from each of you. And Laura, why don't you go ahead and start?
So thank you, everybody, for having us here. I think maybe a couple of topics we didn't get to talk about was one of the things we brought up in our campaign, which is huge to me, is buying local. How the city council spends so many millions of dollars outside of Austin, and they have incredible control and influence over how those dollars are spent. And I can give example after example. The biggest example that I want to say is a art project for the downtown library. $400,000 contract was given to a company in California, and we were at an event last night at an art complex in East Austin, and there are artists all over Austin that could have bid on those projects and gotten those awards. I think if we don't buy local, we are doing a disservice here to our community. And in a lot of ways, the city council has influence over that. It affects our affordability, it affects the dollars, the economy, and I think when we don't invest in our community, it has a much bigger impact than just the absolute dollar that's being spent there. And I think it's a huge issue, and I'd like more focus on that. So,
Mike?
Thanks, Jeff. First of all, thank you again for allowing us to be here. I want to respond to the last comment because Ms. Presley keeps bringing this up. There actually isn't a lot of latitude. In fact, it's illegal to select someone in a bidding process unless certain circumstances occur. And those certain circumstances are the second place bidder, one, would have to be local, but two, would have to be within 3% of the first place bidder. And it can only be on certain professional services. It can't be on construction and contracts. Those are our major projects that we do. Absolutely support buying local. I agree with her 100%. But there is not as much latitude as folks would like to think. It would be irresponsible, in my opinion, if we always chose just the Austin firm. That's the point of low bid, is to watch out for your tax dollars. I do everything I can as chair of the Minority Women Small Business Subcommittee to make sure that we're keeping our tax dollars local. But if you remember the Holly decommissioning power plant, I delayed it by 4 months so that we could save $11 million because the second place bid was so much lower than the first place bid. And the first place bid stood there and said, "We're from Austin, we're here, we've got an office here." And I said, "Too bad. I don't understand why you're at 21 million and second place is at 11. There's something wrong." We rejected it, we started over, we saved $11 million. But we picked a firm that isn't based here. But it's $11 million. I can't express enough how important it is to understand the totality of those decisions and not just say we're going to always buy local. We're going to buy local when and where we can, but we're going to absolutely protect taxpayer interest as much as we can, and I'll continue to do that on the City Council.
We have about 2 minutes, so I'm going to take prerogative of chair and ask a simple question. Do you support giving Apple incentives to move to Austin?
Thank you.
Yes or no?
Who goes first? I say no. Can I say why?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was at the meeting on Thursday, and there's a very high bar that I would set for giving subsidies to companies, because basically it is providing competitive advantage over one company or another. The issue with Apple is they're bringing 3,600 jobs. 1/3 of those jobs are not benefit jobs where you don't have health benefits or contracts. So that's a big issue for me. The other issue is that they're lower paying jobs. They're in the lower end is $35,000, which is not, is barely above poverty. Okay, for a family of 4, you would not survive on $35,000. You would be really struggling. Also, the area that it's going to be in, the taxes for the school taxes, it's in the Round Rock Independent School District. We're not even going to get ASD money for this plant. And it's so far north that, it's in Austin legally, but it's in Round Rock Independent School District. For $8 million, the return on investment's about $14 million. I don't think that's a high enough bar for our investments. I think we should save those funds for a company that could bring, for example, manufacturing, thousands of jobs, manufacturing jobs, let's say solar manufacturing or some other type of manufacturing that has a range of high-paying jobs and over all education levels, and this does not meet that bar for me. So I would say no.
Mike?
Jeff, I support the current proposal that was brought to council. I can't sit here and tell you that we're going to create affordability and help people find jobs and get people out of lower socioeconomic status without finding those jobs. And I don't know of any firm that's willing to that's committed to bringing 3,600 jobs to Austin over the next 10 years. The reality is, what Apple is doing is taking a vacant piece of land that is not bringing taxpayer dollars to Austin right now. They're going to commit to a $26 million structure. That $26 million structure then will be appraised and valued at market rates. those are the taxes, those are the property taxes that we will forego moving forward. If they don't achieve 650 jobs by 2015, the deal is off. And they owe us property taxes moving forward on that $26 million facility. Again, it's not like we're taking money out of city coffers and handing it to Apple. It is value that they would create by the multi-million dollars in investment on that site to create those facilities where none exist today. So I will continue to support it unless something drastically changes.
In this particular case, it appears that they had already made a decision
Exactly, thank you.
according to the Arizona Republic. And so it's really just
They're coming.
$8.6 million.
They're already coming.
Yeah.
We're at our time
Good
limit.
question, thank you.
And it's a lot to consider with regard to that issue and a lot of other issues. As I said earlier, we'll have our board meeting later this evening to probably change our bylaws to a higher threshold of numbers to endorse. And hopefully we'll make that decision this evening and we can announce it tomorrow. We really appreciate you coming. There are snacks and stuff over there if you want some water and some drinks. And we're going to take about a 15-minute break until the next group. Thanks for coming.